Before the Eagles became one of rock music's defining acts, before Hotel California played on every radio in America, four young musicians were simply someone else's hired help. That someone was Linda Ronstadt, and the decision she made in 1971 quietly rearranged the future of an entire genre without her ever intending to. Los Angeles in 1971 ran on ambition and California sunlight. Country rock was still finding its shape, and Linda Ronstadt, 25 years old and fresh off her album Silk Purse, needed a backing band for a promotional tour. Her producer John Boylan helped her find four musicians who, on paper, were simply available. Don Henley from Texas, a drummer with grounded rhythm and a quiet hunger underneath it. Glenn Frey from Detroit, a guitarist burning with energy and something harder to name. Bernie Leadon, whose guitar work carried a distinct country flavor that felt almost inherited. Randy Meisner on bass, smooth and quietly melodic, completing a sound none of them had yet realized they were building together. None of them walked into those early rehearsals, knowing they were about to become one of the greatest bands in rock music history. Linda, though, may have already sensed it. She wrote in her 2013 memoir, Simple Dreams, that she knew right away Glenn was going to be a star, and that Don was always brimming with ideas. Her instincts were reading the room correctly. On July 12, 1971, at Disneyland in California, the four musicians performed alongside Linda for their first and only time as her official backing band. The show wasn't massive, but something electric moved between them backstage, and Frey and Henley started to feel a creative partnership forming that neither of them could quite explain yet. John Boylan recalled in a 1975 Rolling Stone interview that Linda saw their potential from the beginning, and that she told him these guys would do something big if they stuck together. She wasn't wrong about much when it came to music. During rehearsals and studio sessions that followed, Linda noticed the distinct personalities at work around her. Frey moved fast, pushed ideas hard, and never shied away from a disagreement. Henley was meticulous, focused on every detail with a kind of precision that could slow a session down. At one rehearsal held at Linda's home, the four musicians played an early version of Witchy Woman, a song that would later define the Eagles' debut, and the creative differences surfaced plainly. Frey wanted an aggressive guitar riff that clashed with the mystical folk rock mood Linda was after, and a tense but brief exchange followed. They resolved it, landing on something balanced, but the pattern was already set. Linda worked from instinct and emotional resonance. Frey wanted power and impact, and the gap between those two approaches never fully closed. Henley layered in his own kind of pressure. While recording in 1972, he pushed vocal arrangements further than Linda found useful, and her response came back calm but firm. "Don, I need simplicity for the vocal to shine." Henley backed off, though his desire to control every creative detail sometimes made sessions feel tight. Author Mark Elliott described him in Life in the Fast Lane, published in 2020, as a perfectionist who wanted ownership of every decision in the room, and that instinct occasionally created friction with Linda, whose best work came from feel rather than calculation. Leadon and Meisner sat mostly outside the tension. Their quietness gave sessions a stillness that Linda later reflected on in a 1980 Billboard interview, comparing working with a band to playing chess with people who don't speak the same language. No conflict, just distance. And then there was the afternoon someone finished all of Linda's tacos, while she stepped away to take a phone call. Frey was still chewing when she walked back in, grinning without a trace of guilt. "Sorry, Linda," he told her. "They were just too good." She pretended to frown, and let him know that if he touched her tacos again, she'd throw him out of the studio entirely, and the room burst out laughing. Even in its smallest moments, this group had chemistry that couldn't be manufactured. When Henley and Frey eventually decided to form their own band, Linda told The Guardian in 2016 that she wasn't surprised at all, because they were too talented to stay behind anyone. She let them go without friction. Boylan brought Leadon and Meisner into the new lineup, and what became the Eagles stepped out from under her shadow and into their own light. Their connection didn't dissolve when that happened. In 1973, Linda recorded Desperado for her album Don't Cry Now, delivering a version of the Henley-Frey composition that drew serious attention to the song long before the Eagles made it a classic. Henley told NPR in 2016 that Linda brought Desperado to life in a way they hadn't expected, and that she made the song breathe. That changed when Don Henley contributed harmony vocals to Blue Bayou on Linda's 1977 album Simple Dreams, his warm baritone winding through her powerful soprano in a way that felt natural and unhurried. Linda wrote in her memoir that working with him was always a joy, that his voice was both smooth and magnetic. And even after the Eagles had reached the kind of fame that makes people hard to reach, they still showed up for her without hesitation. The Los Angeles music scene in the 1970s moved the way few cultural moments ever do, fast and warm, and full of people who genuinely believed in what they were making. Linda, the Eagles, Jackson Browne, Emmylou Harris, all of them circulated through the same rooms and venues, feeding each other's work and sharing a sound that was becoming something larger than any single artist. The Troubadour became a meeting ground where ideas changed hands over late-night sets, and a joint 1975 concert with Jackson Browne brought some of these artists together in a way that felt less like a business arrangement and more like a neighborhood gathering. Frey told Billboard in 1982 that Linda was an essential part of their story, not just a singer, but an inspiration. And Glenn Frey was not someone who handed out words like that carelessly. Then came the Aladdin Casino in Las Vegas in 2004, and a moment that changed the temperature of Linda's professional relationships almost overnight. During a concert, she publicly praised Michael Moore's documentary Fahrenheit 9/11, calling it an important perspective and encouraging the audience to watch it. The crowd split on the spot, some applauding, others throwing cups and walking out of the venue, and the casino canceled her contract before the week ended. Several peers in the music industry, including members of the Eagles, stepped back from future collaborations with her. The Eagles had long kept their political views private and weren't interested in being pulled into public controversy. Henley told The Guardian in 2008 that they respected Linda, but that sometimes distance from unnecessary disputes was necessary. Linda, unmoved, told the Los Angeles Times that she only said what she believed to be true, and that music doesn't exist in a vacuum. In her 2019 documentary, she recalled that she wasn't surprised when some people turned away, and that she had no regrets. None. Linda's musical range was always the thing that made a single label feel inadequate. Her 1974 album, Heart Like a Wheel, became a career high point, blending country rock and pop, with tracks like When Will I Be Loved becoming cultural benchmarks. From there, she moved into Latin pop, into traditional Mexican music with Canciones de mi Padre in 1987, and into opera, all without losing the thread of who she was. In a 2013 NPR interview, she said she didn't want to be boxed into a style, and that music was how she explored the world. That restlessness influenced artists including Shakira and Norah Jones. And Taylor Swift acknowledged in a 2014 Billboard interview that Linda shaped a generation of female performers who refused to stay in one lane. The Eagles built their own monument in parallel. Their greatest hits, 1971 to 1975, released in 1976, became one of the best-selling albums in the history of recorded music, with tracks like Lion Eyes and One of These Nights dominating the airwaves for years. Frey told Rolling Stone in 1994 that they wanted to make music people could see themselves in, and they succeeded so completely that artists from Nirvana to Chris Stapleton have acknowledged them as a reference point. Journalist Ann Powers wrote in the New York Times in 2019 that Linda and the Eagles turned country rock into a common language for a generation, from California bars to stages across the world. And that description holds. Now 78 years old, Linda Ronstadt lives quietly in San Francisco, near her daughter Mary Clementine, a graphic artist. Progressive supranuclear palsy has limited her mobility and her ability to speak publicly, but her engagement with the world around her hasn't stopped. She writes, advocates for immigrant rights and the preservation of indigenous culture, attends small art exhibitions around the city, and through her 2023 podcast, Feels Like Home, she shares personal stories and reflects on the Mexican cultural influences that shaped her music from childhood. She told listeners in one episode that she wants young people to understand that music isn't just melody, it's human storytelling. The Eagles, now with Don Henley, Joe Walsh, Timothy B. Schmidt, Vince Gill, and Deacon Fry, are preparing a virtual museum expected to launch in 2026, a digital archive of unreleased demos and behind-the-scenes material overseen by Henley himself. Linda remains part of their collective memory, her name and stories still surfacing in recent interviews with Henley and Walsh, decades after that first performance at Disneyland. What started as a touring arrangement between a young singer from Arizona and 4 musicians who needed work became one of the most unlikely origin stories in American music. Hotel California and Blue Bayou still pull new listeners in every year, finding people who need exactly what those songs offer. The music outlasted the drama, the politics, the distance, and the illness, and it keeps finding its audience without any help at all.